Whenever I hear someone say that something that is unnatural or something that's processed is unhealthy, I just roll my eyes. Look, I know this is a newbie. I know this person isn't super well read on health and fitness. And it's a telltale sign that you don't know what you're talking about. Look, I want to point out a quick contradiction. Usually when people say this, they're referencing food, drinks, supplements. I do want to point out before we get into that aspect of it, because I think that's equally as laughable. But from a medical standpoint, most people, assuming you live in the United States, I can't comment on other countries, inside the United States, you'd be hard pressed to find a person, with the exception of Amish people, but even Amish people, that has not taken a bunch of vaccines, that has not taken a bunch of medications, that has not gotten at least one surgery or one tooth removal. All those things are extremely unnatural. When people are walking through the jungle, they aren't finding these hyper-processed things that are made into a little pill. That there is no natural fact of normal modern-day medication. That stuff's completely unnatural. Vaccines aren't natural at all. Getting a surgery on a broken, that's not natural. Those things aren't occurring in nature. So I do want to point out that contradiction, that if you are going to acknowledge that things that are less processed, things that are natural, healthier for you, you kind of are at odds with your other position and your current lifestyle of going to the doctor and getting medicated. Just seems odd. Now, I do want to, once we get into the food, once we get into the drink, once we get into the supplement aspect of this, there's another contradiction in these people's argument that say that natural's good, unnatural's bad. And that is, well, what constitutes natural? What constitutes unprocessed? Because to me, it's a very complex spectrum. It's not as simple as one ingredient natural, two ingredients unnatural. First thing I'd like to point out, animals nowadays, fruits and vegetables nowadays, look completely different than they did 100 years ago. All these animals are getting much, much bigger. Hormones are getting pumped into their body. Fruits and vegetables are getting much larger as well. They even look different. I Google any fruit and Google a picture of it 80 years ago. They just look different. Animals are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They're getting pumped with estrogen. They're not healthy. But anyways, what exactly, even if you get the natural preservative-free from your local Trader Joe's, is that really even natural? Maybe it's more natural than Pop-Tarts and Quest Pizza. I'll agree with you on that. But there isn't such a fine line. It's not to say that there isn't a distinction between these things, but it's not a black and white situation. It's how processed is this food. And if you look at it from that perspective, now it gets interesting. Where do you draw the line? Is it once it gets over 3 ingredients? Is it once this thing has to be processed in multiple factories? Is it when you can't read an ingredient? Now we get into some complex territory. With those two contradictions aside, the medical contradiction and then the lack of nuance when it comes to what exactly means processed, I do want to get into the lack of evidence, lack of proof for the statement. Look, if you were going to make the statement, unnatural is bad, processed is bad, well, why? Why? I mean, genuinely, why is whey protein something that is extremely cheap, something that's extremely lean, it's a complete protein? Why is whey protein bad? A lot of people say whey protein's bad, and I don't get it. I really don't. What in the processing of taking dairy, it's casein and whey, and they remove the whey? Whey is kind of the waste product of dairy. What about that is bad? You would have to make some sort of argument. A lot of these people just rest on I just feel like natural things are better. I mean, look, if you're going to make the claim, it'd be ideal if you had something to back it up. I'm not asking you to look at it at a molecular level and zoom in on the cells and say, oh, these cells are binding improperly. I'm not asking you to be a full expert, but can you give me something? Now, if you do want to make the argument, and I do think this is a fair argument, that a lot of processed foods have a high level of sodium, a high level of saturated fat, and a high level of sugar. All three things, especially when eating in a caloric surplus or when ate at a BMI over 25, those things can become problematic, especially in conjunction. Can lead to a lot of problems. Diabetes, heart disease, cancer, etc., etc. If you want to make that argument that foods that are generally processed more have higher levels of those things, that's a fair argument to make. But then it wouldn't really have anything to do with them being natural or unnatural, because there are a lot of foods that have no processing that are high in sodium, that are high in sugar, that are high in saturated fat. So in that instance, what would be better? Would the natural food that's high in sodium and high in saturated fat and trans fat, would that food be healthier than the processed whey protein? I don't think so. I think you have to look at these things, maybe read the nutritional label, and decide for yourself. Maybe you might have to spend some time in the grocery store comparing labels. But it's not as simple as just it's unnatural, so it's bad. It's lazy, it's elementary. I mean, that's what a kid would say. If you ask the kid what's healthy, you'd say, fruits and vegetables growing from the ground are natural. Pop-Tarts are unnatural. They're bad. It's like, we got to do better than this.